Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Innnovator Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Williams, and in this week's episode, I was joined by Juliette Connolly. Jules currently works in customer transformation at IBM and is a seasoned executive with a mission to place ideal human experiences at the core of all business interactions and transformations. She's built up over 25 years of expertise in experience design and has a rich background in coaching and mentoring professionals across various industries. Something I've also seen myself is she's a strong advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and might as well let you know now, she's a good longtime friend and colleague. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with this week's Ops Innovator, Juliette Connolly. Hey, Jules, welcome to the Ops Innovator Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here.
We're going to spend some time talking about creating great experiences and what in the world we might all do to think differently and innovate about how we approach doing something like that. What was that journey like for you in your career to get to where you are now, where you understood the importance of experience and just the trip that you took along the way to get to what you're doing now?
You know, it's a really interesting question. And I think the word journey, unfortunately, is wildly overused these days. Everything from reality TV to social media to taking a walk around the block. But mine really was. I didn't graduate university. In fact, if you really want to know the truth, I haven't actually graduated year 10 yet, but have managed to create a career over 30 years that really is about creating extraordinary experiences. I started out as an event manager. And when you create events, you really realize that you have to make things that are personal and meaningful for people. And that led into, about 15 years ago, an exploration of what's now called design thinking or human-centered design. You'll hear a lot of that terminology.
Yeah.
And it made me realize really quickly that everything we do as really just a whole human is about how we experience the world. And we talk about that in business as customer experience. We talk about that as employee experience. Right. We talk about it as partner experience. But really, at the end of the day, it's how do I as a human relate to the world around me, whether it's the job that I do every day, whether it's the brands I choose to interact with, and everything that surrounds that.
And I just sort of picked out a couple of words there where you talked about making it personal and even just relate, right? Because if I spend on that word relate to just the relationships, right, of what kind of environment can we create for everybody, so those relationships then become part of the experience of being inside an organization. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And it's such an interesting question when we talk about this as being meaningful for operations people. The challenge with those roles is in a lot of cases, people see them as quite transactional. They are roles that are, it's finance. It is things that are quite process driven. They are roles that are, we do A after B after C. And therefore there's, ostensibly no creativity in those roles. I would argue there's more creativity in operational roles than there are in many, many other jobs that you'll see in organizations. Because I love it. Operational roles are the ones that actually see the foundations. And if we think about this as the way we build a house, we build it from the foundations up. And if something isn't working right, or if the bricks are misaligned in the foundation, then the whole house comes crashing down. And it requires creativity, and it requires really a deep understanding on the part of those operational people to make that a meaningful thing for a business. So I think there's an opportunity for operational people to be used as creatives much more than they are.
I totally agree, right? The more that we can, inside of organizations, create environments that, one, encourages people that would be in more supporting operational type of roles to get involved in creative things and in innovative things and have the opportunity to do that. But of course, knowing, at least for myself, doing that in a way that is conducive to people like that participating
So there's two lenses to that, Scott. It's really something I'm deeply passionate about. I'll touch on one first, which is I spent a lot of my life coaching and mentoring facilitators and designers. And the one thing I have always said is for them to pay attention to their introverts. It's really easy for the extroverts in a workshop or a creative session to get the attention because they're always the ones there with their hands up first and volunteering information. But I always coach facilitators to look for the guys and the girls in the back, the ones that are sitting there quietly and introspectively looking through all the ideas, and to let the extroverts get all their ideas out and then to actually go and talk and say, Scott, what do you think about that? And that is invariably where the gold comes. Every single time, the thing that either brings the conversation either to a really meaningful creative place or encapsulates exactly what you're trying to achieve comes from that operational introvert at the back.
So what advice or what tips could you provide to people who might be out there who want to be able to do and say and live the kinds of things that you're talking about, right? That you've experienced and those skills and patterns that you've developed over the years. Are there courses people should take? Are there specific things that they should do if they want to sort of follow in your footsteps and come to the kind of realizations that you have and be able to do the kinds of things that you're doing now?
So look, it's a great question. I love the power of threes. So I'm going to give you three things.
I love it.
One is going to be spend some time actually learning human-centered design techniques. Because experience always matters. Our interactions as humans are about how we experience the world with each other. And I think that there are lots of courses online, most of them are free, that can actually teach you some just basic understanding of what it means to explore viability, feasibility, and desirability, and how we bring those together in human-centered design. So that's point number one. Point number two is, especially if you plan to lead other humans, invest yourself in adaptive and empathetic leadership. That means that we really treat people as unique individuals. We don't just lead a team the same way. We lead through empathy and our unique human experience. And, you lead every person on your team in a different way. Their career paths are different. Their desires are different. Their personalities are different. And you have to show up in a different way for each of those people. And that really is what leadership means to me. And the third and last one is really quite simple, and that's stay curious.
I've always believed that establishing a great working environment and creating one that people want to work in, right? They seek out working in that environment, is all about the experience of working in it, right? Everything else is secondary. It doesn't really matter what you do. It's got to be a place where people feel like they can deliver value, they can do their best work, and feel like they're making a difference. And you do have to get out of the echo chamber. You do have to be curious, and you have to think creatively about it. What is innovation? So what does that word mean, right? Because everybody says it. I said it. I wrote a book about it, for God's sakes. But what does it mean to you really on the ground?
It's such a fascinating question. Because innovation can be everything from understanding that the process you've just designed doesn't respond well in a really human environment to creating the iPhone. And it's that literally runs the gamut of it. I think the most important thing when we're talking about innovation is really how it manifests a more positive experience or a more positive product for the people involved. And you're always going to hear me talk about this from a human background, right? This is about manifesting for the whole human. There are tons of products and tons of services in the world that support businesses, that support all of the larger scale non-human experience we have. But I think what really matters when we're talking about roles and people is what that means and how it manifests for others. So when I talk about innovation, it really is both the small steps and the large gains we make in order to create a manifestly different and improved experience for humans.
One thing I'd love to deep dive into and get your perspective was on the large and small bit that you just talked about, because the celebration, the promotion, the water cooler chat for the large, that just happens naturally, doesn't it? Look at this cool thing we built. Did you hear about what XYZ and so is doing? Sally's doing this and Bob is doing that. But we don't often find people celebrating the small. How do we start to get people to recognize that there's just as much value in the small as there is the large that you were talking about?
So, look, I'm going to take this from the perspective of leadership.
Yeah.
And I really focus clearly on those interactions we have with the people that work for and with us on a one-to-one basis. And how do we get people to toot their own horn in every single time we have one of our one-on-one catch-ups? So where are we having those opportunities to celebrate those little successes? Because I can guarantee you that Sanjay, who has just saved 5 minutes off of a process, is finishing his day and walking into his house going, I did good work today.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But Sanjay may not actually be telling his boss. So his boss needs to clear the space to be able to say, hey, what did you do this week? And where did you have some fun, or where did you innovate, and what were the results about that? And equally important, Scott, is where did you fail this week? Because we'd learn not just from the stuff where we had greatest success in innovation. We learn 1,000 times more from the stuff where we failed. And I know you and I have been talking for 7-8 years now about how do we get people to be comfortable with the learning they get out of failure. Failure is innovation in and of itself.
No, definitely 100% agree. And that sometimes I even wonder if it's, we're not doing ourselves any favors by even using that word. Right. And just the baggage that it comes with. Right. Because you'll hear an executive will stand up in front of their whole company and say, I want you to fail fast. I want, it's okay to fail. We're going to celebrate failure. Right. And I, at least personally, have definitely had people there's a misunderstanding of that word. That doesn't mean you can take stupid risks and do the wrong thing and break all of the rules all at once, right? You can break a few and try some things out. That's innovative, but break them all at once. Do everything wrong. Okay, you failed. Well, that's bad. We're not going to celebrate that, right? But what we actually mean is you took smart risks. You tried something new in an experimental way that had an out, and it was careful, and you did it. You followed the proper processes to do that, and you're leveraging human-centered design techniques and agile techniques and lean techniques and whatever that is. Those are the kinds of failures. What we mean is you tried something innovative and it didn't work. Here's what we learned. Not I completely failed to do this the right way, and we've now lost $1 million.
And it's really interesting when you talk that way, because I look at the emerging cohort of people coming into the workforce and Gen Zs. We need to help set those guidelines for them because they really need to understand what it means to be creative, to fail, and to have those smart risks. So I think it's really interesting because I think we need to reconsider this in terms of the fact that we have this Gen Z cohort coming up that are now manifesting in our workplaces. And they come from a very, very different place than millennials, Gen Zs, and boomers. They have a very different understanding of what it means to fail. and they see failure as incredibly bad. So we need to actually, as leaders and as coaches and as organizations, give them safe spaces to be able to understand what a safe risk is. Because in
Yeah.
many cases, they've never experienced it. I did a big piece of analysis recently on that entire cohort, and it made me realize that if you were a Gen Z in Australia, and actually, let's be more specific, if you're under 31 years old in Australia, you have
Yeah.
never experienced a financial downturn as an adult.
Right.
So they have no context for what it means to do safe risk analysis. So we need to give them the guide rails and the support to be able to innovate in a way that isn't throwing out all of the bathwater simultaneously.
Yeah. You're so right, because I've always felt and have openly talked about a long time that in order for companies to actually allow people to innovate and to encourage them to innovate, you have to define what you mean by innovation in your business, right? This is what it means to us. But that definition extends to lots of other concepts like you're talking about. When we say fail, we're using that word. This is what we mean, right? We mean this, so that people know where the very real boundaries are and where the guidelines instead of rules are, right? Which is a very different set of lines that you can or can't cross.
Which is interesting for operations people, because we go back to the conversation we were having earlier. A lot of ops people tend to be quite black and white, and that's just nuance in the way that they think. So how do we actually encourage them to have the freedom to not look at the world as just a set of parallel lines, but rather you have now an expanded field of play, and you can work through that field of play, and you can be anywhere on that field of play. It is literally not just going north all the time or going south all the time, that you have this opportunity to explore what Southwest feels like.
So I want to maybe pivot a little bit to talking about some real problems in organizations that you've either seen recently or are seeing now, that coming back to the overall experience conversation, when it comes to creating a good experience inside an organization, either for the customers or for employees, what are the things that is standing in the way of an organization doing that, whether it's imposed on them or self-imposed?
Look, Scott, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm going to look at this from an internal standpoint. I think there's so much research that's going on about what we can do from a customer standpoint, that I think that the thing that is keeping us really constrained is actually our way of thinking about organizations. We think about organizations through the lens of organizational design and hierarchy. Meanwhile, what we're going to need in order to be agile enough to be responsive to the changes in the economy, the changes in our world, the changes in our demographics, and the changes in the demands of our employees is actually thinking about work very differently. I think we need to start thinking about work in the way we think about a portfolio, and the way people are thinking about their careers. And I think the best lesson is actually from agile and agile teams and agile squads. How do you bring together a disparate group of people for short projects to be able to learn from each other and actually do really impactful work in short amounts of time? What we're allowing people to do in those situations is to grow not only their personal understanding and their personal education, but they're allowing themselves to build skills and capabilities that are outside of, the traditional hidebound, this is what I went to university for. I think we all recognize that university degrees, the way we have been manifesting themselves in the last 80 years, really do not fit the modern workforce at all. I recently challenged one of our major clients to actually determine whether or not they needed degrees for the roles that they were hiring for at all. What they need is people that are prepared to bring together a series of capabilities and skills that no university degree is ever going to teach them. So how do we
Right.
provide our people and how do we provide our organizations with abilities to cross-skill, upskill, and build capabilities, and to be able to then say, this is the capabilities and the skills I need collectively throughout the organization. How do I map those? How do I measure those? And how do I grow those?
It's resonating with me because I've always seen that the quickest way to kill the vibe, right, and diminish the experience inside of an organization for the people is to put roadblocks in their way, right? And that structure that you're talking about, whether it's in how you structure your BAU activities, how you structure your projects, whatever kind of work it is that you do, right? That's just two examples. But not giving people access to the skills and capabilities they need to supplement their own to achieve a particular goal is one of the biggest roadblocks you can put in their way.
And I go back to something that we've talked about for a very long time, which is it's great that every organization we've ever talked to has a corporate strategy. What they don't have is an employee experience strategy that is mapped into a corporate strategy.
Yeah.
And it frustrates the living daylights out of me because, I've been in and out of consulting now for a number of years. And most of the clients I've worked with, when you look at their corporate strategies, one of their key structural pillars is our people. Our
Always.
people are a key part of our strategy. And when it comes to prioritizing dollars, every other part of the strategy gets the money except for employees.
Yeah. What's the first thing cut out of any budget, right? It's the training budget. It's the professional development budget. Always.
Absolutely. It's a leadership budget. And it's all of that just makes me realize that we're saying the words because they're corporate buzzwords and we know that the research is true, but walking the walk is really difficult.
Oh, it's totally difficult. And it's reminding me of some things that I've seen as well along those same lines, right? Even if they do have a strategy, they oftentimes lack the ability to translate into something meaningful for people so they can actually execute on it. And it doesn't just become this piece of paper that is stuck on the wall and 4 bullet points that go up on a website to say this is our strategy. What can they do to then actually execute on it? How do you get people to use the thing on a day-to-day basis?
So look, there's 3 things. The first and most important one is invest in your leadership. People do not leave a bad job, they leave a bad boss. Period. If you invest in adaptive and empathetic leadership and actually make them accountable for what their engagement with their employees is, it's going to change the bar significantly. To me, that's the number one thing. Number 2, actually articulate your employee experience strategy and make every business decision have to go through that lens. We talk about it's great to have a corporate strategy, but when you're talking about prioritization, it has to meet 3 criteria. Does it achieve our corporate strategy? Does it achieve our customer experience strategy? Or does it achieve our employee experience strategy? Most organizations have the corporate strategy. And I'll be honest with you, in years of consulting, especially in major organizations, you get 2 levels below the C-suite and scratch an executive and ask them to articulate the strategy. They can't say a thing.
No.
Let alone
Absolutely.
this concept of an employee experience strategy.
Yeah.
So articulate it and live by it. And by live by it, I mean prioritize against it. So what we originally started talking about here, which is, our people are our most valuable asset, but we'll assign money anywhere else but, doesn't wash if that becomes a key criteria in your prioritization framework.
Yeah.
And lastly, communicate. Really communicate honestly and authentically with your people. The more that you are as leaders, and especially your CEO and your executive suite, authentic and prepared to actually have the tough conversations with your people, the more likely you
Right.
are to have a higher engagement score, even in really tough times. In tough times, when you're prepared to stand up and say, I made a mistake, or we made a mistake, or the world is not the way we want it to be, and this is what we're going to do about it, allows your people to trust a lot more.
Look, we probably should wrap it up there. I have a feeling we could go for hours and hours if we really wanted to, but I think that's a great way to wrap up the sentiment of this episode, and it was great. So, look, thank you so much, Jules, for being this week's Ops Innovator. I really appreciate your time and such a great chat.
Thanks so much, Scott.
Ops Innovator is produced in Sydney, Australia by 10% Labs. Our purpose is to engage thought leaders from all backgrounds, industries, and professions to explore what it takes to be truly innovative in how people and organizations work. From operating models and organizational structures, through policy and process to ways of thinking and working, it's about doing things differently and bringing the future forward to make things better now. The opinions shared by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily represent those of any organizations with whom they may be associated. If you would like to join the conversation as a future guest, or if you'd like to spotlight your startup that is focused on improving how organizations work, visit us at 10percentlabs.com. Until next time, this is Scott Williams encouraging you to keep looking for ways to do things differently so you can do them better.